Testing. All right, Madam Chair, at your convenience, we're ready.
Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the City of Riverside Planning Commission for Monday, August 19th, 2024. Roll call, Madam Clerk.
Mrs. Denning,
Here.
Mr. Hairston, Mr. Owens,
Here.
Mr. Rogers,
Here.
Mr. Vasquez.
Here.
All right. Mr. Hairston is going to be late. He's stuck in traffic. So we'll move on to approval of agenda. At this time, is there a motion to approve the agenda as published?
So moved. I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as published. Is there any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We'll move on to the approval of the July 15th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting minutes. If there's no additions or deletions to the minutes, I'd ask for your approval.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from
Second.
the July 15th, 2024 meeting.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the July 15th, 2024 meeting minutes of the Planning Commission. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, before we open up for our public hearings that we have on the docket tonight, I'd like to remind everyone, including commissioners, staff, as well as anyone who wishes to speak at the podium, to please adjust your mic down so that it can be not only heard by everyone in the room, but also it's being recorded so those at home can hear, and it helps our clerk in doing the minutes as well. Also, a reminder that this meeting is a business meeting, and we do ask that everybody conducts themselves in a professional manner and treats everybody's opinion with respect. Also, when we get into our agenda items, we can only discuss tonight what the issue is on the agenda. So if it's a site plan, it's only about the plan. It's not about the zoning, it's not about other things, and we'll reiterate these things as we go forward. But everybody who has signed up to speak, if you have filled out one of these sheets and handed it up front, if you'd still like to speak, you still have time. You can hand it to the city clerk or to Naya Holt, and they'll pass them down to me, and I will call on you when we get to the item on the agenda that you wish to speak on. Everyone will be kept to 3 minutes, except for staff and the applicant. All right, so at this time, I'll open the first public hearing. That is PC case number 24-0011. This is 4740 Linden Avenue. This is a preliminary review of a major site plan for a sports facility. So again, it's a preliminary review of a site plan. So at this time, I will start with staff first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before Ms. Holt gets to her staff presentation, I do want to remind folks, especially because we do have both this case and the next case are similar in terms of what we're asking the Planning Commission to consider this evening. So just to help set the table, especially for folks that may be watching at home or haven't or not super familiar with the Planning Commission process, just as a general reminder, so we are a city that has a zoning code. The function of a zoning code is to basically indicate what types of land uses are permitted on specific parcels. Both of the cases before you this evening have proposed uses on those parcels that fit the currently designated zoning. So this is called a by right development, meaning the property owner has the right to do the thing they want to do on the property. Well, the Planning Commission's job in cases like these is to look at the site plans that the developer is proposing and to be sure that those site plans fit what the rest of the code requires for those plans. So those are things like setbacks and other requirements that we have in the code where the code says a site plan should have X, Y, and Z. That is what staff review for and what Planning Commission weighs in on through a by right process. So the question is not, does the Planning Commission want a pickleball court for the specific example? A pickleball court is permitted by right. The question is the site plan provided by the developer consistent with what our code requires? So just wanted to set the table in terms of how this case and the next case will function pursuant to a typical review. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Holt to give her presentation.
So before I get into the details of either of these cases, it is appropriate for me to give the oath just like anybody else. I, Naya Holt, affirm that the testimony I am about to give before the Planning Commission is correct to my knowledge, 5200 Springfield Street. So the case before us is at 4740 Linden Avenue. We've already gone through this. This is an aerial of the subject site here. This is the proposal that is before us, the site plan. The applicant is proposing to develop this nearly 13-acre site for a sports facility that is a pickleball court for indoor and outdoor courts. It'll be done in several phases, including first putting in and constructing the outdoor courts, or excuse me, the indoor, which you will see here in the elevations, and then moving on to doing a few of the outdoor. This is the renderings that was submitted with the preliminary plans. And now we're moving on to some of the site photos that it is today. This is the adjacent property to the west, adjacent property to the east. This property is actually owned by the same developer. This is a property across Linden Avenue. This is the area where the proposed,
Go that way.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
all right, this is the area where the proposed building would go. There are 2 buildings being proposed for the indoor courts. And then stormwater retention basin would be to the rear of the property. There's also a parking lot for those players, of course, to park, and it'll be around here on the site. And then outdoor courts, one area is around here. It's a large site, so this is the best way to capture one area of where those courts would go. So looking at what our code requires and preliminary site plan information that we got, it is actually justified and does meet our standards for approval. We are recommending that the Planning Commission approve this preliminary site plan with conditions. Those conditions are listed in the staff report and here in this presentation. The applicant is working with our technical review committee to ensure that their site conforms with the requirements in our zoning code, our Unified Development Ordinance. That includes stormwater management, traffic, landscaping, and all those things that are within our development standards. The Linden Avenue area is primarily commercial. I know there are other uses in that area, but it is primarily commercial. And we do find that should this site be developed, this could be a neighborhood asset if all of the phases are developed as proposed. So we are recommending that you do approve it with those conditions. So your actions are either approve as is before you, approve with the conditions, or you could deny the application if you find that it is not meeting those standards. Are there any questions?
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, I'd like to call on the applicants, David Marshall and Michael Benacourt. Close anyways. If you want to come to the podium and if there's anything you want to add or anything like that as the applicants. And you do need to recite the oath.
I, Mike Betancourt, 807 Conifer Trail, affirm that the testimony I am about to give before the Planning Commission is correct and to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
So I'm Mike Betancourt. I'm one of the co-founders of Black Barn Pickleball, an avid pickleball enthusiast, been playing about 8 years. To say that it's changed my life would not be an overstatement. I've found community and fitness and fun and a whole just a whole group of friends that I never knew I had before. So we are avid pickleball players. We know that the Dayton area has multiple players. And unfortunately, due to the weather in Ohio, dedicated indoor would be a great asset to the community. There's about 215 days a year that you cannot play pickleball outside due to rain or wind or snow or cold. And a dedicated facility would give all the players a place to play year-round. So in this endeavor, we looked around for places to build, and we found these old Smiley's driving range. And Jeff and I actually lived about 5 minutes from there at one point in our Dayton careers, and had fond memories of it. And just as a side note, when we kind of put out where we were going to put this, we got multiple messages from people that used to frequent Smiley's and either work there or hit balls there or hit the batting cages or miniature golf, and people were just excited that this could possibly be another kind of modern iteration of the kind of family fun center that was there in the past. So as we looked around and we found this site, the 13 acres gives us a lot of room for development. It gives us the ability for the outlots to maybe add in some retail or restaurants or things that might go well with the people that would frequent our site. And it's an awesome location, central to everything, North Dayton, South Dayton, 675, 35. We were just super excited that it was available. We did meet with the city. We understood that there are some challenges to it, which we believe we have addressed. And as indicated, the first phase of our plan would be, once we get the blessing of the city, to begin construction on our indoor courts, the 8 indoor courts. In the spring, we would then construct the 8 outdoor courts and a second building, which would be 10 to 12 more indoor courts. The proposed operating hours of the indoor facility would be from either 7 to 9 or 7 to 10 p.m., and the outdoor would be dawn to dusk. So we do not plan on lighting those outdoor courts, just be available because we know people love to be outside when they can in the city, and it would be a great place for them to play as well. So that's the overview of the proposal, and I'm not sure what I do at this point.
Okay. Is there any questions from the Planning Commission for the applicant at this time? Are you the only one speaking on behalf of the applicant?
For the introduction, yes. If there's some technical questions, fortunate to have David Marshall, our civil engineer, here to address those.
Okay, awesome.
Okay.
All right. Well, there's no questions right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move into those who have submitted speaker request forms then. And again, 3 minutes on topic as far as the plans, the development plans, the site plans. That's all that we can consider tonight because everything else has already been done. Okay? So we're going to start. I have, we're going to go back and forth between support and neutral, it looks like. So the first one I have is David Frail. I didn't recognize you. You've changed so much, Pastor.
Do I need to, I don't need to.
Yes, you do.
Okay. I, David Fail, 1380 is the church's address, Spalding Road, affirm that the testimony I am about to give before the Planning Commission is correct to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
As mentioned, I'm David Fail, pastor of the church at Eastmont, which is adjacent west, as you saw in the pictures, to the site plan. We were a revitalization, I guess you could say, project that God told us to do about 5 years ago. And since then, we have formed relationships right next door to us, across the street, Eastmont Elementary School. We love them. Most recently with Carroll High School. Mayor Pete was a judge for our chili competition. But we love our community. We love the city. We love our neighbors. And I am strongly in favor of it. I've known the Benton Courts for several years. My wife has worked with Jessica Bentoncourt, Mike's wife. My daughter has worked for Mike Bentoncourt. I know him as a person. I know him as a businessman, and he's a man of integrity. And everything he does, he does it because of his love for people. And I've seen that firsthand. And when I heard about this proposal, I was ecstatic because out of the 200 people in our church that we serve on a weekly basis, senior adults and young adults play pickleball a lot. And they are also excited about the possibilities of this. So, yeah, I strongly support it and I'm in favor of it. No, we all are at the church. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing me.
Next up is Rebecca Howard.
I'm not really sure. So I need to state this?
Yes.
I, Rebecca Howard, and my address is 1460 Roseview Street. I'm directly behind where they will be building. Affirm that the testimony I am about to give before the Planning Commission is correct to the best of my knowledge. I guess my question would be for the builders. I love the idea. I'm an exercise physiologist, absolutely love the idea.
I do need you to stay to the mic.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I love the idea. I think it's absolutely wonderful. My only concern is some of the building, and we flood tremendously directly behind there. And I know they've stated something along the lines of a retention pond, and I'm curious of the building with some of that, how it's going to affect my land. So that's my only concern. Well, I should say that, along with how are they going to do fencing or provide anything for that? So those are my two concerns. So I guess that's for the builders.
Okay.
So, because like I said, it directly affects me because I'm right behind there. So,
Well, what we'll do is if there are questions like that, and that is a site plan
okay,
questions, we'll have the applicants take those notes, and then I'll bring them back up, and they can address those questions.
okay.
Okay,
That's
instead of
my
us
only-
going back and forth, we'll try
That's
to,
totally fine. That's
to
fine.
facilitate everybody's time a little bit, if that's okay.
That's fine with me.
Okay.
Okay. Well, what would be the plan for the surrounding area, I guess I should say? Are you planning to put fencing, or how are you going to provide anything surrounding the area around there? Does that make sense?
Screening and that, which is all in the code. Okay, so the next one I have up is Mr. Zachariah Joseph. Isn't that what you just put on here? Zachary. Oh, well, I gave you a new name.
I, Zachary Joseph, 4300 Air Rock Avenue, affirm that the testimony I'm about to give before the Planning Commission is correct to the best of my knowledge. A little different being on this side of the dais. I'm in support of the proposal. I, as of recent, am a pickleball player. Picked it up as like I'm turning 30. I need to find a sport to get myself out of my house because I work from home all the time. And pickleball has definitely gotten me and my husband a little bit more active. It's a great workout. The property on Linden Avenue has been brought before council a number of times. We've discussed it, and it's an exceedingly difficult property to develop on. So I am super excited that we have an applicant that is willing to come and develop the parcel. It's a great use, in my opinion. There's about, give or take, about 20 outdoor courts or like parks or places with pickleball courts in the area. There's only a handful of indoor pickleball places. That'd be like at a YMCA or a membership-only like racket club. That is your options to play pickleball in the non-habitable months. So this provides a service to the community. It provides an attraction to the region. I mean, we have the Air Force Base right here. I would say that you have the Air Force Base, Pettibone, and this pickleball court. That'd be like the three big things. People would be like, that's what's in Riverside. That's the level of attraction that this would bring to the area. So I'm extremely in support, and I hope the Planning Commission votes in favor of this. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Mr. William Weaver.
You're going to have to guide me a little bit here
No problem. So there should be an oath there on the dais. If you can read that and state your name and your address for the
All
record.
right. I'm William Weaver at 1429 Gulf Street, and I don't have a whole lot to say other than ask some questions.
Okay.
So I want to put some questions on the board with, about the fence and about the trees in the back. That would be the south side. How that's going to happen, because my property's got, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 foot at the corner, southeast corner. And I like the shade, and I think my neighbors behind me like the shade. So, but I'm sure there's going to have to be some thinned out, and what kind of fencing's going to be put around and where the fencing's going to be placed at is a question in my mind. And also, I'd like clarification on what they're going to do with rainwater runoff there. Not only is there a problem on the one side on near Spalding, those residents over there's got a problem, but we do see ponding at the bottom of our property when everybody else is flooded. So that's another concern that I have. Other than that, don't have anything else. We welcome that sport there. Hopefully, it's going to be entertaining to be out in the backyard. If we get a yellow wiffle ball coming over there like that, I'll get my plastic bat out and take care of it. But anyway, thank you for the time, and that's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Dave Roush? Rash? Rash? Okay, thank you.
My name is David Rash. I live at 1444 Spalding Road. I'm right at the back. I have the acreage right at the back of the place that floods terribly. That was one of my concerns.
Can you do the oath, please, that's on the?
Oh, I'm sorry. I state your name and address. I, David Rash, at 1444, affirm that the testimony I'm about to give before the Planning Commission is correct to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So, again, the fence around it, the retention pond, how is that going to affect us mosquito-wise? We get water back there all the way, so I imagine that would be flooded pretty much. And this is a problem that hasn't been addressed in over 70 years. The people that lived there before me bought the property in 1939, built on it in 1949, and couldn't get nothing done about the water since then. We've had the engineers out to look at it. I haven't personally, but I know my neighbor, Don Kanapke, had them out, and they said they couldn't do nothing with it. So this flooding problem is a problem. Another thing, we were asking about the grass being cut up there, And I don't have the digital thing to see the plans. So I was hoping to get a paper and something with writing that I could actually read about this, so I could understand it better. But that's my concerns, is the water, the flooding, stuff like that. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Okay, as you've already heard, I'm horrible at names here, so Rajani Powers, did I even come close? Ranjani.
I, Ranjani Powers, affirm that the testimony I am about to give before the Planning Commission is correct to the best of my knowledge. I'm at 1387 Gulf. My concern is, like most everybody else in here, the fencing. It's a mess back there. Where we are right back up to it. There's some of the old netting there. We are in the process of creating a lot of pollinator islands, but that also means that we have added endangered species of plants in our gardens as well, too. Behind us, it's full of invasives. It's full of poison ivy. Like the gentleman said earlier, I love the shade. There's some great shade there.
I need you to stay into the microphone, I'm
There's some
sorry.
great shade. The locust trees are phenomenal, but the invasives are creating a lot of problems back there because they're coming into my property. I can only clean my property line so much. And the fencing is horrific. So like most of the people in this room were very concerned about what the fencing is going to look like and how the cleanup is going to look because the trees need to stay, but the invasives need to go.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. All right, so at this time, I'm going to ask the developers to come back with a list of questions and try to answer the local residents' questions, because I think they're all valid to the site plan.
And Madam Chair, we can pull up the landscape plan if that would
Yes.
be helpful.
Yes, please.
Hi, David Marshall, 3171 Research Boulevard, that's the company's address. Affirm that the testimony I'm about to give before the Planning Commission is correct to the best of my knowledge.
Thank you.
So I guess the question I have for everybody here is everyone's talked about fencing. Do you want fencing? Do you not want fencing?
The mic,
as far as
please. Can you
screening?
turn back to the mic?
Microphone,
I'm sorry.
please.
Do they want fencing? Do they not want fencing as far as screening?
We want the trees. We want the fencing, we want the trees, we want the invasives gone, especially the poison ivy.
Okay. Yeah, so here's our conceptual landscape plan. Initially, we were planning on augmenting the existing landscaping, the existing trees that are there. There's no plans to clear cut the existing vegetation. Certainly, we can go in and maintain what's there, and, get rid of some poison ivy and things like that. But the fencing that we were proposing was safety fencing around the detention basin, not fencing around the entire property. And we can have further discussions about that, whether a vegetative screen or a fencing screen is preferred. I know they're both permitted within the code. So we'd work with the residents on your preference as to which way to go, and it may be a combination of both, okay? The other issue is flooding, and it's a reoccurring comment from the residents. As they know, everything drains from Linden back down to that southwest corner and then heads out to Spalding. Our concept is to provide a detention basin to capture all that runoff, keep it on site, and infiltrate it into the ground so there is no runoff from our site to the residents. I don't know if that will solve their flooding problem, but it certainly will alleviate any contributing factor that our 12 acres has. And mowing, well, that's a maintenance issue, and of course they'll want to maintain their facility. I think that answers everything that the residents have that I had written down.
Retention, runoff.
And then I will note that our code requires that a developer maintain the runoff and doesn't contribute to the situation. They have to just maintain the runoff on their site.
Okay.
I do have a question.
For the,
So
okay.
How do you address that? How do you address the mosquitoes?
So the type of basin that it is does not hold water.
It infiltrates into the ground, so it's not a permanent pool. And during times where it's not raining, it'll be dry.
So I have a question
Yes.
as to when that retention pond is full, how long does it take to infiltrate down?
We have had additional borings done, and we're in the process of calculating that, whether it's 72 hours or a couple more, 3 days, 4 days. We're working on that, so.
Okay, ma'am, I have to ask that there's no commenting out, okay?
So that's something that we're working on in the final construction drawing application.
that will be addressed at that point.
Okay. And this is a preliminary plan, correct, staff? So they'll still be working with you with those kind of numbers to determine the size and what is needed for that runoff?
That's correct.
So even though he might be throwing those numbers out at you, for those who may be concerned about the runoff, with those additional testing that they're doing will also determine them working with the city planners to determine the size and everything that they need to help hold that, but not hold it over a long period of time, because you're looking for it to be a dry basin most of the time, correct?
That's correct. And the reason we chose this approach is we knew there was flooding issues, and there's ways we can distribute the flow as it's flowing now, and that's just not beneficial to the neighbors. So we wanted to maintain all our stormwater on site and infiltrate it into the ground to help alleviate the flooding issues that people are seeing next week.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, anything else? Okay. Anything you'd like to add, Ms. Holt, in reference to the questions from the residents?
So this is, like we said, a preliminary plan. It does have to come back to Planning Commission. So those here and with whoever is in 300 feet of the property will receive notice when it's back to Planning Commission for that final site plan review.
Yeah, yes, fencing will be addressed in the final site plan. We'll work with residents to get their preference and address that.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay. I have no further comments from residents up here, and everyone has spoke. If Planning Commission has no further questions for the record here, then we will close the public hearing piece of 240011, and we'll ask commissioners how they'd like to proceed. We've already had public comment. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, sir. We have a certain order that we have to do things, and I have to. Okay.
It has nothing to do with them. It has nothing to do with the city.
Okay, well, I'm sure that the city manager will be happy to speak with you after the meeting. Okay? Thank you. Okay, so, commissioners, how would we like to proceed here?
I move to approve the preliminary major site plan with the conditions as recommended by city staff based on the evidence, testimony, and standards for approval in the code.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve PC case 240011. This is 4740 Linden Avenue. It's a preliminary review of a major site plan for a sports facility with the conditions as recommended by city staff based on the evidence, testimony, and standards for approval in the code. Is there any further discussion among commissioners? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Vasquez?
Yes.
Mr. Hairston?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mrs. Denning?
Yes, motion passes. Okay, thank you all. We love having this much communication and seeing residents and the developers trying to work together. And thank you to our developers for wanting to listen and answer questions and that. We appreciate that. That shows you good partnership moving forward. Thank you. Okay, moving on to PC case 24. And again, if there's anybody here for this case, I will need your slips up front if you choose to speak, which I have none. Oh, well, wait a minute.
No, that was most of the people. Then I just got that.
I figure. I just figured I'll wait and give them a chance to leave before we get started, if you all don't mind.
You're good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Can you shut that door, Nick? Thank you. Or Officer Toscani.
They're having a lobby party.
Yeah, that's okay, that's good, that's good.
They got a parking lot party too.
Neighborhood communication. Okay. Moving on to PC case 24-0013. This is the Glendine Avenue parcel without an address yet. A major modification to an approved site plan. So at this time, I'm going to open PC case 24-0013, and we're going to start with staff report.
As Madam Chair mentioned, this is a modification to a site plan. So these modifications include a reduction in the density by a few units and increasing the setback to the rear of the property. So this is the site in question. It is zoned R4 multifamily residential. You may recognize it because it was before you earlier this year. So they are within that year timeframe to come back to you. This is the plan that was approved in March, and this is one thing I want you to be aware of, and then kind of the layout of the units. So you will see, because this was shifted up right here, the units had to be compressed, and the roads changed, and some units were lost due to that. The developer here can explain more of the reasoning behind that, but because of our code, it was a change that we could not approve at staff level, so it is before you today. Just a few reminders of what the site looks like right now. Very much like the one before you, it is a site plan approval. They're trying to develop a lot that has been vacant for some time and does have some site challenges, but not much to see. This is the location of the proposed townhouses and stormwater basins, since that seems to be something that our residents are very concerned about. So there is that in the plan, and just another rear view of that same location. So we do recommend approval of the modification. It is very small, even though it is a major one, just because of how our code is. It does conform with our UDO and with our comprehensive plan. It's consistent with another nearby multifamily development, and it will be designed in a manner that is consistent with that other development. So we do have some conditions. The developer is working with our TRC and all the other conditions that were in the earlier case. So here are your required actions: to approve with conditions, or deny if you find that it's not meeting the conditions of approval anymore. Any questions for staff?
Questions for staff?
Can you depict for me where the basin is
Yep.
supposed to be?
Yep,
In the
let me go
aerial,
back
if
to the
possible.
aerial. So this might be, it's going to be up here. And if we go to the aerial, it's in.
Okay.
Yeah, right here.
And if I remember correctly, when I went back to my notes from the first one, and maybe I'm missing this on the drawing, because, I have to get a magnifying glass out to see these. But originally, I know it was discussed that there'd be 2 fire hydrants located.
And that was one of the comments that the fire department, and we've already sent that over to the developer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there'll still be 2 fire hydrants like the fire department wanted. Is that still their desire?
Yes, they would like to have adequate fire hydrant
One
access.
towards the entrance and one's towards the back, so they can work both sides of the property if that was my notes from the last case. Okay. All right. Any other questions for staff? Okay, at this time, I'd ask the applicant if there's anything they'd like to add.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission. I, Lance Oaks, 8534 Yankee Street, do affirm that the testimony I'm about to give before the Planning Commission is correct to the best of my knowledge. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you to Naya and Josh. They have been excellent to work with. The reason we're back here tonight, like Naya said, is we had gotten approval back in March, and we're looking at getting started with construction out there. And if Naya, I don't know if you can go back to the first picture of the overall site that you had. But originally, when I was looking at this property to purchase, it was actually 14 acres, but I cut off that back 4 acres. You see that area in between there? This site was used as an old landfill, I think, for construction debris and other stuff back in the 40s and 50s. And I thought I had pulled my property line close enough, and I thought I had caught it on my engineering drawings the first time. But when we dug our test holes for foundations, we realized some of them were going to be in that, so that's why we pulled it forward far enough. So that was on me, that was my mistake, and that's why you see the engineering plans still stay very similar, but there is those slight changes and the necessity to pull it forward. So, but thank you very much, and happy to answer any other questions you guys might have.
Any questions for the developer?
And just from a timing standpoint, construction, we look to start out there because I can't get it in before the asphalt plants close up this year. So we'll start about the October, November timeframe, put pipe in over the winter and be ready to pave come May, June when they open back up.
Any questions for the applicant?
How many units did you have to check?
It's going to be 97. It was originally 99. We kept it under that 100 threshold, but it's going to be 97.
It's 2 units.
We did, yeah.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, I have nobody asking to speak on this issue, so at this time, if there's no questions for staff or the applicant, I'll close the public hearing and ask the commissioners how they'd like to proceed.
I'll make a motion to approve with conditions in PC case 24-0013 Glendine Avenue unaddressed parcel to approve the major site plan modifications with the conditions as recommended by city staff based on the evidence, testimony, and the standards for approval in the city code.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve PC case 240013. The site plan modifications with the conditions as recommended by staff. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mr. Hairston?
Yes.
Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Vasquez?
Yes.
Mrs. Denning?
Yes, motion carries. All right, just continue working with Ms. Holt. Thank you very much. You too. All right, well, we're plugging right along here. Go through the gauntlet there. Okay, moving on to PC case 240012. This is a text amendment, a zoning text amendment for urban agricultural regulations. This was continued from our last meeting. So we have, do we need an update from staff?
Before Ms. Holt gives her report, I'll just jump in real briefly on this one as well. This was, I honestly thought we'd have a few more people in here, so this was also, but it is a preview for folks who may be watching at home, so we'll couch it in those terms as well. But just a quick reminder that, Madam Chair, as you said, this was a review that was initiated by the City Council several months ago. There was a motion made to consider this. Just as a general reminder, The staff's goal throughout this process has essentially been to bring you, as the Planning Commission, the best balance of what broadening the current code could look like. And now what's before you is the culmination of several months' worth of work and outreach at peer cities and gathering research about what other codes include, and having heard some concerns and also advocacy from our own residents to try to blend all that together into one package. And so, as a quick reminder, although you will see the red line text in front of you this evening, or it's in your packet as well, the Planning Commission is not the final stop in this matter. The Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council, and that can be to approve with conditions, or to deny. But effectively, that becomes a cover sheet that sits on the ordinance that Council will consider. So again, just as a way of context setting, there is another step beyond the Planning Commission step in this process, and the City Council will determine how to deliberate and proceed once it's through Planning Commission. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Holt for her update.
And this is like a zoning amendment, or that's why it's a text amendment. So you are making that recommendation to the City Council, as Mr. Manager said. We did see a lot of this language before, but one of the recommendations you told us to not go away, but to take back and look at was the lot sizes that we were considering. And we did, and we looked at some of the codes that you had pointed out to us, and that's what that's highlighted section is, that one poultry, one bird per 800 square feet. Now, we kept what you said and still kept that conditional use for those larger lots, so those would still be considered, because those would be the ones that would be more agricultural uses and would have that still broader allowances. And of course, the ones 10 acres or more would have those larger allowances too for more agricultural uses. So the other things of qualifying properties have not changed. Again, these things are the same. We are leaning heavily on our property maintenance code, making sure that the areas that the chickens or ducks are well-maintained, clean, there is sanitary conditions, and that they are buffered from neighboring properties in a way that does not cause a nuisance condition or a hindrance to others nearby on these smaller lots. And we are also having the permit requirement so that we can help to track and monitor those who have these chickens or ducks on their properties. So other restrictions that have been talked about are having no more than six birds, backyard birds, no male birds at all, and not having this be a commercial operation is just for pets or getting eggs just for your family. So that cannot be sold on site, no slaughtering, things of that nature. So we also, because this is a wider thing, because sometimes it's not about just having birds, but also about creating community and spaces for people to have access to food. We're also considering community gardens as part of this code update, and we have code language in there for that. So we can go over that. I know we talked about that last time, but there was no substantive changes to that code. And then, as we stated, your job is to tell us if we did what we needed to do, and you heard your changes, and whether you're ready to make that recommendation to council tonight. If not, then you need to know what modifications there need to be, or if you want to recommend denial. Any questions for me? Each of you should have a copy of the text in front of you, in a pen.
When we're talking about some of these smaller lot sizes, in terms of square feet, what would be the smaller lots we'd be talking about? So like if we're talking 800 square feet per chicken, I mean, does that exclude very many lots in the entire city? Because if they could have 6, that'd be what, 4,800 square feet? I don't know. Is that,
It would not exclude a lot, as long as they meet the qualifications to get the permits. It wouldn't exclude a lot of lots.
so most of the lots in the city that are not bound by some other type
No.
of restriction, like a homeowner's restriction, would
That's
be
cor-
able to have 6 chickens
Yes.
regardless of the lots?
Now, I would lean towards our law director when we have those strange properties that are split up by several lots. You have a house that sits on 3 lots, for example, or a split, and how we would handle that situation. So I would turn to our law director in that situation when we come.
Those lots are about 6,000 square feet. 40 by 150. Oh, I said those lots are about 6,000 square feet. They're about 40 by 150.
Yes, we have quite a bit of
Yeah.
those. Mhm.
So, I mean, they're within that 6,000 square feet divided by 8, that's 7.5?
Well, you're capped at 6, though, but
Right.
the
So
point
then-
I was trying to make is that just about virtually every lot in the city then
Yeah,
could have
could
6
have
chickens
6
regardless of
chickens.
the size of the lot.
Naya, is this
And I-
800 square feet, is that a parcel size? The whole of a parcel's, when you say one poultry for 800 square feet, is that 800 square feet of a backyard? Because they're only allowed in backyards, right?
That's correct. But it's,
So,
no, it's looking,
but
it's
you're-
looking at the entire,
Including where building coverage is?
That's similar to how
Yeah.
Cleveland drafts their code.
yes.
So that's where that came from.
I just want to make sure that I'm reading it correctly, because it just says 800 square feet. I don't know if it's 800 square feet of the parcel, of the backyard.
Parcel.
Of the green space.
Yeah, the entire
partial.
parcel.
And this is something that Taryn actually researched for us that night to make sure that we weren't
correct.
excluding too many residents with the new text amendment, with what was listed thus far as well.
And if we need to clarify that language before we bring it to council, we can do that.
So if I'm reading this, currently, as the code reads today, you can have chickens in Riverside if you have 1.5 acres in a residential lot, meeting the conditions that are laid out. And this amendment would allow for any residential lot in the city to have chickens moving forward. Is that, I'm just making sure that I'm reading it correctly.
As long as they follow the other guidelines. of
Right,
the-
right, but
Correct.
the largest, I think that's all understood also.
Yes.
But I keep thinking if this was going to BZA, for example, if right now you need 1.5 acres to meet that condition, and now we're saying that there's basically no size requirements that, of any substance that need to be met, you're talking about a 90, if most of some of our smaller lots are maybe 2/10 of an acre, maybe a little bit smaller in some cases, that's like a 90% reduction. I don't know that would ever pass BZA. I don't know that staff would ever recommend that pass BZA. I think it's too large of a reduction. The planning commission came last month with a recommendation to go down to half an acre. And the reason that this just doesn't gel with me as an ex officio on your board, and you guys are going to vote however you want to vote, but the planning should be able to be applied universally throughout a specific number of parcels or neighborhoods, not determining your destination and then working your way backwards. And I don't know that the best planning practices were being employed by saying, we want to make sure we can have chickens on my lot, so give me that. We also took out the federal, state, and industry standards that had been in the previous, that are currently in the code. Those are no longer in the code, the red section, but they remain in the part about keeping bees and the part about community gardens. So I just don't, I feel like we wanted an outcome that we worked our way backwards to. That's how I read this. And that's similar to Naya, I have a background in planning, and I think that I don't like how we're getting here, even if the commission tonight decides that this is something they're going to recommend, that the amount of reduction in size of lot that's in paper, that was talked about last time, I just think that's too much of a jump from where we are today.
But I think that's what we're seeing.
Seeing
though,
where?
Xenia. Xenia has no reductions.
None of our adjacent communities have that.
Really?
And we want to
Xenia
jump.
does. Xenia now has no restriction on lot size.
There's not one adjacent community to ours that has this, and we want to jump to the highest standard in the state, which is Cleveland, which is 6. I just think it's too large of a leap.
Well, I think too, we have to look at what our residents have to deal with the way this community was originally plotted out. And it was not plotted out with standard lot sizes due to the situations at the time. And we need to, the whole idea is to allow people to have access to this. And I think that's, what we need to look at is what's best for our current residents and what we're dealing with in our code. Now, there's nothing to say that we can at some point go back and say, well, this is too much, or we've had too many complaints and we can redo it. But let's, start where at least we can get a good idea if it's going to work. Half acre or acre in Riverside is not a majority of properties.
No, certainly, and I would cede that, but I'm also wondering if jumping all the way to almost no restrictions and then hoping it works out well and hoping that property values don't plummet and the largest. single
Property
investment
values
that
aren't
goes-
going to plummet because of chickens. It's the up and coming way. Let's be progressive and not hold back and wait for everyone else to be progressive before, and then Riverside jumps on the shirt tails later.
I would certainly
So-
agree with you, Madam Chair, that part of our city wasn't laid out as a regular plats were, but there's a large amount that has been, and that's very reflective in their deed restrictions and their deed covenants. And I don't think that should be something that should not be a part of the discussion. I just think this goes way
Deed
too far. in one
restrictions and that are part of the discussion.
I know, but I'm saying that you were pointing out that a large part of our community wasn't laid out. I don't know, I don't want to say, put words in your mouth, it wasn't laid out in a uniform way, but a large part of our community was. And a large part of our community spelled out the type of neighborhoods that they wanted and the type of neighborhoods that people moved into. So I
And
just
they
think this-
chose those neighborhoods, so
Yes,
they're
I
safe from
feel like
that.
I feel like that
But
we're
the
kind of-
communities that are asking for this are the ones that aren't laid out with that.
It's the Valley Plat, it's the Blytheville Plat, it's the low-income sections of Riverside
Whoa, I
that
don't
want
know if to-
additional places to have chickens.
Well, but you're proposing a code that applies across the entire city.
So be it. It's up to our code to enforce.
Yeah, I know,
It doesn't apply to the whole city because
Because we got
half the
deed
city's under
restrictions and all
covenant and
that.
deed restrictions
Yeah,
that they can't
and there's going to
do.
be people that want chickens that can't have them. And I think that the way that this is going to be perceived is that everybody can have chickens now, and then when they find out they can't because they're getting sued by their neighbor, that it's going to be the city that looks like the ones who made this a problem. But again, I'm only contributing as an ex officio, and I thank you for letting me contribute.
Okay, thank you. All right. From what I could see, I think staff addressed everything that was on our notes from the last meeting. Is there any other questions for staff from the commissioners?
I just want to confirm that I was reading correctly.
Thank you, sir.
Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. I just want to confirm that anybody that's doing the per chicken that's under the 9.9 acres still has to come for approval, right?
They have to get a permit, yes.
Permit, and you got to look at their neighborhood, how close they are to their neighbors, all of that prior to approval.
That's correct.
Okay. Just wanted to confirm.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
can I make a motion to recommend approval of PC case 24-0012, the UDO text amendment? I move to recommend approval of the UDO text amendment as requested to City Council based on the staff recommendation, deliberations, and discussions held at the hearing on this case.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to council for PC case 240012. This is a zoning text amendment for urban agricultural regulations. Is there any further discussion?
No discussion, but just a comment. I'm not going to be supporting this because I do think it creates a patchwork where it's unevenly applied. It's going to be hard to administer because of that. I feel that, particularly with this change to the 800 square feet, one chicken per 800 square feet, that it allows a level of permissiveness that I don't think is going to be good for the city. And I had mentioned previously that I supported the community garden section of this part of the code, and I would have liked to seen the two separated so that we could have considered those separately, because I do support the community garden provisions. But I'll be voting no on this evening.
Any other questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Owens?
Yes.
Mrs. Denning?
Yes.
Mr. Hairston?
No.
Mr. Rogers?
No.
Mr. Vasquez?
No.
Okay, motion fails. Okay, moving on to staff discussion topics. Ms. Holt?
Mr. Miller and I met last week, was it? About the retreat. And one of the updates I have is the speaker that we had tried to get virtually will be coming in person for our retreat on September 14th.
Awesome.
Yes. So that is an update that I have, and we're excited to bring that for you. We have an outline of what that day is going to look like, so we're excited.
Nice.
I will only know at the last minute.
Yes. Okay. But that's all I have.
Okay. Matters by commissioners. Mr. Harrison, anything?
None.
Mr. Owens?
Nothing.
Mr. Vasquez? Mr. Rogers?
Not this evening.
All right. All right, then at this moment, seeing that there's nothing else before commission